Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Jane Longhurst. We are in my neck of the UK for this case. We are down south. Hold on to your hats because it is a bit grim. Let's go. Sin and Tonic! Our story takes us to Brighton in East Sussex, along the south coast. I will show you on the map, and the year 2003. I can remember seeing this case in the newspapers, and I can remember seeing Jane's face an awful lot. I almost can't believe I haven't covered this case before. When I came across it, I was like, oh yeah, I can remember. Anyhow, no better time than the present, so let's dive on in. In the early hours of the 15th of March 2003, 31-year-old Jane Longhurst was reported missing to Sussex police by her partner, Malcolm. He had waited for her to come home. She didn't come back. He was very concerned because it was very out of character for her. So he called her mum, he called her sister, he called friends to see if anyone had seen her, if she was with them. And then when it became late and she still wasn't back, he then went and called the police. Jane was a special educational teacher and she was a talented musician, and she was very happy and content in her life. She was kind, she was thoughtful, she was well liked, she had a lot of friends, she had a thriving social life, she had a partner, Malcolm, who she'd been with for 4 years. She was successful in her career and she had a caring profession. So she was a special educational teacher. You have to have empathy, compassion, kindness to do that job. She was close with her mother, she was close with her sister Sue. Her and Malcolm were going to move out of Brighton actually and start a family together. And they also, both of them, played in the same orchestra. So she was a talented viola player, and Malcolm, I'm not sure what instrument he played. I didn't see that, but he was in the same orchestra as well. So they were musical. I just think that's so cute. It just sounded quite wholesome and quite sweet. An investigation was launched into the disappearance of Jane, and Malcolm was interviewed extensively because it is quite often the partner. Like, your loved one is missing, and you must get that sense of that people being like, where is she? Like, what do you know? You must get that a bit. Anyhow, so he was dealing with all of that, but there was no foul play. He is innocent in the whole affair. So they found out, as I've just told you, all about Jane's life, and it became apparent that this was not somebody that was just going to walk away, somebody that had just run off. You never know. But it didn't seem that way at all. It seemed like she was very happy in her life, and her life seemed, like I say, wholesome, and she was really content. That's the word I would use. She was very content at the time. They then looked at her bank account and her phone records, and it showed that there was no activity whatsoever, which is worrying, after the morning of the day before, so Friday the 14th of March. The last phone call that she made was at 10:05 on the Friday morning. That phone call was to her best friend, Lisa. Lisa lived in Hove in a flat with her boyfriend Graham. But Lisa was at work that day, so it wasn't Lisa that answered the phone, it was Graham, and he told police that he'd picked up the phone and he'd said to her that Lisa was at work and that she wasn't there. The case went cold because it was like she had vanished off the face of the earth. There was no evidence, no suggestion of foul play or like nothing. They couldn't find her at all, and that gives me so much fear. I find it really eerie and sickening when these sorts of things happen, when people go missing and they're never found, and I find it really awful. I can't dwell on it too much, but it's a big fear of mine. I just find it crazy that someone can just disappear and never ever be seen again. So this is what was looking like was happening with the case with Jane, because we were sort of 5 weeks into the case. I'm the police officer in the case. They were 5 weeks into the investigation. Sorry, I'm just like inserting myself in there like I'm a character in the story. It's not a story, it's true crime, but you know what I mean. What's wrong with me? Anywho, so, God, it's really hot. It's really hot in here. 5 weeks pass, no leads, nothing. And then Saturday the 19th of April 2003, a member of the public who is 20 miles away at Wigan Holt Common, 20 miles away from Brighton, they discover an unusual fire. Like the flames are an unusual colour and it's all a bit weird. So they call the fire brigade, who turn up. And then sadly, it's discovered that this weird fire is actually somebody has set a body on fire. This body would later be identified through dental records to be that of Jane Longhurst. Her body was naked. Her body had a pair of tights tied around her neck, and her face was covered with a scarf. And her body was amongst like a large cardboard box, like a really big box. So it was likely that she had been transported to this area in this big box, and then the whole thing set on fire. The autopsy showed that Jane had actually been murdered weeks before her body was found. So she hadn't been kept alive somewhere. She had been killed like 5 weeks previously to her being found and her body being burnt. Her cause of death was strangulation by ligature, and it was thought that she'd been kept somewhere cool in the meantime, so between her being murdered and then her body being dumped and set on fire. On discovering Jane's body, the closest friends and family were then all re-interviewed again, because this is now a murder investigation. I mean, how awful actually to think that, but I guess they have to, because now it's changed from a missing person to a murder inquiry. This included Malcolm, her partner, and also it included her closest friends, who at the time were Lisa and Graham. Do you remember the last phone call that she made was at 10:05 on the Friday morning, and that was to Lisa's flat, but Lisa wasn't there and Graham picked up the phone. So he is called Graham Coutts, and he had told police that she called. He just said Lisa's not here, she's not available, and that was that. Well, little backstory, Graham and Lisa, so that's a couple, and then Malcolm and Jane, couple, they were quite close. They would spend quite a lot of time together. They socialised together. They went out, like together. And Jane and Graham would sometimes go swimming together. So that wasn't unheard of. So they were good friends. So they were re-interviewed. When they were re-interviewed, the officers noticed in the flat some large cardboard boxes, and they were almost identical to the large cardboard box that Jane's body had been found in. What are you going to do? This is very suspicious. Graham now becomes suspect number one. When I share a picture of the cardboard box with you, you'll understand why it was suspicious, because it's not just like a normal cardboard box. These are, Anyhow, so because of this, they arrest Graham. They do. Even though it seems a bit like, oh, wow, what, he had some cardboard boxes, but they do. However, when he is taken in, geez, my eye. Oh my gosh, worse, made it worse. Literally rubbed it, made it worse. When he is taken in to be interviewed and all of that jazz, he just says, I answered the phone. I haven't seen her. That's the last I spoke to her, and I told her that Lisa was at work. That's it. And they had no evidence whatsoever. All they had was the fact that he had this almost identical cardboard box in his flat. So after 24 hours, he was let go. At first, I thought that was a bit weak, arresting him on that. But in some cases, people get arrested and they just go, like, they confess, don't they? So, strange things have happened. But he didn't do that. He was, nothing to do with it. Like I say, I can remember, how old was I in 2023? I was 17 at the time, so it was a long time ago. It's 20 years ago, but I can remember mainly her face, and I remember just thinking, like, it was frightening, really. I remember that. A local business owner, manager of a storage facility in Brighton, saw the same thing. He saw all of these appeals in the newspaper about this missing woman, and then obviously, her body showing up 5 weeks later. And he kind of just sort of put two and two together, because he had been a bit concerned about the behaviour of one of his customers. This person was acting strangely as the weeks went on, and the storage unit that he was renting to this customer started to smell. It had a whiffy smell. And he thought, not much of it, but when he kept seeing about this woman in the news, he was like, imagine. So he called the police to just say, I'm just going to put it out there. And thank God. I think it's the best thing to do if you're a little, just ring in. If you're going to be safe, why not? So he called in and he said, look, I've got this guy, Paul Kelly. He's got this storage thing and it's a bit odd. So do you want to come and check it out? So the police went there, my eye. And my eye. What is wrong with it? Like, hasn't done a thing all day and then I'm doing something and it does it. They look at the CCTV footage of Paul Kelly, and what do you know? It's not Paul Kelly at all. It is Graham Coutts. What the deuce? And he's there, clear as day, signing up. They've got they have to have CCTV footage at storage things, for insurance and stuff like that, and to put people off of stealing. And so he's the whole time from when he signs up to getting a storage unit to when he vacates the storage unit, it's all on CCTV. All of it. Not the sharpest tool in the box. Really not, because when they open the storage facility, unit, whatever you want to call it, his part of it, they find Jane's clothes, her purse, her bag, her swimming costume. That will make sense later. And they find a men's shirt with blood stains on it and semen stains on the shirt. They find a used condom. They take all the CCTV footage and they find that he has been visiting the storage unit on numerous occasions over the last 5 weeks. Courts, I mean. And when they test the clothing, they find that Jane's DNA is on the shirt. They find that Jane's the blood, and they find that the semen on the shirt and in the used condom belongs to Coutts. So damning evidence, wouldn't you say? He was then arrested a second time. Let's have a little moment about this fella. So he was born in 1968, Graham Coutts, in Scotland. And then at some point his family moved, all the way down south. Or he ended up right down south in Brighton. He was lost in life. He was a failed musician. He wanted so desperately to be successful in music, and he was not. I think that's, that happens a lot, doesn't it? And I guess it left him quite jaded. He ended up being a door-to-door salesman, hence these huge boxes of cleaning products, because that's what he was going door-to-door to sell. So he would get big shipments of these cleaning products and then he would try and sell them on. Hence the big boxes. And he was not without a history, let me tell you. And I only wish, you couldn't do it, I understand why, but I only wish that people could have a red, amber or green light above their head, because he had the red flags, his past, and it wasn't that this wasn't known about, and that makes me so cross, because it freaking was. From a very young age, a young teenager, Coutts developed a strange sort of sexual orientation. I don't know how you would put it, but it was perverse. And he started to, I don't even know how that sort of thing happens, but he was a young teenager, and by the time he was 15, he was heavily addicted to porn, and not just run-of-the-mill stuff. He was addicted to violent pornography, mainly asphyxiation and strangulation, and pornography with death and torture and things like that, really vile. His sexual fantasies developed, and then when he was 23 years old, he actually went to a GP to say, this, it's a bit odd, basically, I get really turned on by all of this weird stuff. And he was referred to a psychiatrist who he told that he had sexual fantasies about killing women. I don't know, right? But if somebody actually, you're in a psychiatrist's office and they divulge something like that, then there should be some more action taken. The psychiatrist, I believe, did suggest that he needed to have further assessment, further help, and see somebody else. Even then, like, what do? You can't put someone in prison for a crime that they haven't committed. Is that like Minority Report, that film? Anyway, it's a tricky one, but he was just free to live his life, even though a professional did know that he's like, oh, by the way, I really strongly think about killing women, just so you know. Courts did not see anybody else, and he just went along with his life. He didn't take any advice to stop watching pornography or, you know, things like that, which would be your number one thing, wouldn't it? Like, maybe you should like dial that down if you're, yeah, like that doesn't seem like a good idea. But no, so he carried on, and it just he became obsessed. Of course, with somebody like this, it's going to escalate. It's not just going to peter out. It's a very serious thing. So he got worse. He got more addicted. The things that he was looking at were just vile, and he started to act out on his fantasies. So his girlfriends that he started to play around with the asphyxiation thing. He developed a neck fetish, that's a thing, and became obsessed with strangulation. So he would fantasize about it, and it was also seeping into his sexual relationships. He was also arrested for filming a woman getting changed at a swimming pool. So yeah, escalation of behaviour. So what happened with Jane? So on the morning of the 14th of March 2003, it started out exactly how he had said. Jane had called the flat at 10:05 and he had answered. But he hadn't just said that Lisa wasn't available. He had also said, did Jane fancy a swim? Now this was a normal thing, like sometimes they would go for a swim. Sadly, she would never make it to the swimming pool. After denying absolutely any involvement in Jane's disappearance, in her death, anything, in her murder, all of a sudden, 3 weeks after he was arrested for the second time, Coutts starts to confess. He said that on the way to the swimming pool, Jane and himself went up to his flat that he shared with Lisa. She wasn't home. And they had consensual sex. Shut up, mate. Okay, I'm just going to say what he said. He said that Jane died as a result of exotic asphyxiation gone wrong. Bearing in mind there were absolutely no witnesses to this at all, he could have said anything that he wanted. He chose to say that from the minute they entered his flat, there was not a single word spoken between them. Not a word. And that she agreed and consented to the sex and to the asphyxiation by a simple nod of the head. Like, what? Mate, no one was there. You could have just said, oh yeah, we were having an affair, like she wanted it, like, anything, but you chose to make it like the most unbelievable thing you could have said. I mean, I don't know why I'm annoyed by it, because anything to get him convicted, but what a weirdo. He then said that after 10 days of storing Jane's body in his shed in the garden, he then moved her body in this huge cardboard box to the storage facility. That means that Jane's body was in the garden shed when he was originally interviewed by police. It's just things like that. It's crazy, isn't it? So her body was there. The case went to trial in 2004. Forensic evidence against him, obviously the shirt, the fact that her clothes were in the storage locker, the semen in the used condom, that also had her DNA on it as well. So there was a lot of forensic evidence, and the forensic evidence also showed that they could tell that her body had been in the storage locker, even though it was removed, but her body had been there for weeks, like for the whole duration, basically since when he got the storage locker to the day he was seen on the CCTV removing her body in, again, the big box. And they could tell that she'd been there the entire time and that her body had been decomposing during that time. They had CCTV. It showed him hiring the locker, putting the big box in the locker. It showed him visiting the locker numerous times, I think 10 to 11 times or something like that, he was going there to visit. So much so, he went there so often that he began, after a while, maybe not very long, he started paying for 24-hour access, because it probably freaked him out, the fact that like he was going into his storage locker. He got panicked, I think, that the staff that were working there during the day would be like, what's this dude doing? I don't know, people are strange, aren't they? But so he paid for 24-hour access so that he could go when there was no staff there. So he wouldn't be disturbed, or he didn't have to feel weird. And the CCTV showed that he removed the big box with Jane's body the day before she was then found at the dump site. When he was arrested, they obviously then they look at all of your devices and stuff, and I didn't even know, I'm so naive that these things, I know about the dark web and stuff, but he was paying a subscription, like he was paying monthly to be a part of this website where they show you necrophilia, women being R-worded and then tortured and sometimes being murdered. Just, that makes me feel really sick. Yeah. Fluffy bunnies, I just don't like it at all, because it does exist. It's still there now. Oh, it's just grim, isn't it? And he was paying for that. But not only that, there were just loads of indecent stick images all over his computer. The amount of porn that he was accessing, as well as this awful site, like, just vile. Think about that, what that's doing to your brain. So with the necrophilia thing, it would seem like, so in the earlier years, that didn't necessarily seem to be a fantasy of his. It was more the asphyxiation and strangulation and the whole neck fetish, which then has obviously it escalated into necrophilia, which is like an obsession. Let me find the definition. Just realised, if anyone looked at my history, geez, sometimes I just don't know. I'm like, what? So it is sexual intercourse with or attraction towards corpses. So he added that to his list. The prosecution had to prove that he had intended to murder Jane, because he was saying it was an accident, like it was a consensual sexual thing and it was an accident. So the prosecution had to prove that that wasn't the case. The defence was awful. It was awful for her family and for her boyfriend Malcolm. They painted her out to be this, they smeared her character. Oh, my nose. God, the eye and the nose is all going on. And yeah, just very, very upsetting for them to sit and listen to. The prosecution put forward that it would take 2 to 3 minutes it would have been obvious, for 2 to 3 minutes that she was in trouble. He needed to stop. 2 to 3 minutes, that's a long time. And that he didn't. So that played a big part in his conviction, that she would have been clearly needing him to stop what he was doing, and he didn't do it. He pleaded not guilty, and he was very calm and very cool, and he showed absolutely no remorse. And the other thing I think as well with that is that if it was an accident, there are ways in which you might behave after the fact. Panic, call an ambulance, get help. So many things. Be beside yourself because let's be real, people do these things, is that a fetish? I don't know all the lingo, but some people do that, the asphyxiation thing, and sometimes things do go wrong. And I think if it was a genuine mistake, especially with somebody that you are like in a relationship with, or you care, or like your friend, do you know what I mean? If they were having an affair, or even if this was the first time, he should have cared for her. This was his friend. So, in that circumstance, if you have just accidentally killed that person, the way that you would behave would not be putting her body in your shed and then moving her body to a storage unit where you go and visit it. Absolutely not. So I'm very pleased to say that common sense took over and the jury did find him guilty. He was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years, which then was reduced later on to a minimum of 26 years. I hate it when they do that, but anyway. And that would normally be the end of the case. But no, because he appealed a lot, he just kept on appealing. And the crux of his appeal was that there was also testimony from other professionals to say that his side of the story could be true. There are incidents where, in the right way, or I don't know the science, but it does seem like, from when I looked into it, that it is valid that somebody can die, which is terrifying, can die in 1 to 2 seconds from the right, I hate it, it makes me feel sick, but from the right things being like pressured at the right time. How freaking scary is that? And it is incredibly rare, but it can happen. So there was some like specialists and people to say, do you know what, it is a possibility. It's not likely, but there is a possibility that if they were doing that she could have died almost immediately and there would have been nothing that he could have done. Right, so this was his argument for an appeal and for a retrial, because he wanted a retrial. He wanted that evidence to be put forward. And it was put forward. They did have a retrial in 2007. Her family had to go through all of this all over again. And they had to have the evidence presented, to say, one person said 2 to 3 minutes of her struggling and suffering, and one person saying, oh, in the right circumstance, 1 to 2 seconds. I mean, why? It doesn't matter, because he was again found guilty and he was again given a minimum of 26 years. When things like that come up in cases where people get like they're fixated on, oh, do you know what? And like there's loopholes in laws and things, isn't there, where people sometimes get away with something and you're like, that does not make sense. And really? So I'm glad that he was found guilty again and that it was the same sentence, because okay, there was a possibility that the 1 to 2 seconds, that could have happened. But let's not forget all of the evidence, either side of the one of what happened. So he was sort of arguing this one point, whereas it's like, yeah, okay, mate, that could have happened. Well done. Like, that's a possibility. Okay, we've heard your little bit now, because, that could have happened. But she was starting a family with her boyfriend. She was happy and content in her life. She played in an orchestra. She was a special educational needs teacher. She was happy and content. She thought she was going swimming with you, which the swimming costume was in the locker. She took her swimming costume. She wasn't like going there for consensual sex. Like, no. All of the evidence is that he R-worded her, basically. He attacked her, R-worded her, murdered her, and then kept her body in the shed in a box in a storage unit and visited it. That's what happened, isn't it? So who cares whether, technically some people can die in 1 to 2 seconds. Who gives a crap, mate? Who cares? It is annoying that they even got to that point where it was a retrial, because it's just like, really? And then obviously when he was they started again, didn't they? So they quashed that word, that his conviction, and then they started again. Imagine they found him not guilty. Oh, crikey. But they did find him guilty. And when he was sentenced and they announced the guilty plea, or no, what's it called? When they said he was guilty, they were like cheering. Her family were just like cheering and so happy, because that's just really worrying. It's a bit worrying. I was a bit worried when it said it went back to trial. I was like, really? Oh, just all of that all over again. Anyway, as you can tell, I felt quite strongly about it. But he is in prison. And Liz, Jane's mum, so Liz and Sue, mum and the sister, they campaigned for the laws to be changed, because again, naively, this was 20 years ago, but I had no idea that even then, back then, that it was actually not illegal for somebody to have, like, that site he was on, that he was paying a subscription for, blows my freaking mind. Blows my mind. That wasn't illegal. So if they seized his computer and his laptop, that he couldn't have been charged with anything for that, even though he was watching people being like murdered. But now it is, and that is because of Liz and Sue, and they tirelessly campaigned. It was like 18 months, I think, a year and a half, of them trying to pass this law to say that, because they can't stop. This is what I find horrifying, because, you know, I said it's still there. It's still there. You can still get it. But if you're caught with it, you can be prosecuted and sent to prison. So if you so wished to join one of those sites and you pay your money, if the police catch you or you have it on your computer, you can then go to prison for it. Whereas when this case happened in 2003, he was not convicted for having any of that on his computer because it was technically legal. Wow. Anyhow, so now it isn't legal, and that is thanks to Jane's mum and sister. And that is all I have for you on today's case. Hope you've had a wonderful week. And the week before, I was on my holidays. It was really nice, but I need another holiday on my own now. I didn't sleep basically for 4 days, which was not my favourite. And then we came home on Friday and just so happy to be in my bed. Anyhow, I'm going to love you and leave you because I'm going to walk my pooch now. I'm going to take him round the block, round the village. I will see you all next week for another episode of Sin and Tonic. Have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And I will see you next week. Bye.